Okay, so today we're going to be discussing domain and range. Try and remember anything you can about domain and range and try and come up with a definition. And pause the video and I'll be back in a second. So the textbook definition of domain is the set of values of the independent variables for which a function or relation is defined. But all you need to know is it's all the x values that are defined in the graph. And for the domain, it's all the y values that are contained in the given function. So if we're looking at question 1, we see that it's a straight line with arrows at both ends. So if we were going to find the domain, we notice that it contains all the x values on this line, on this part of the x-axis, and all the x values on this side of the axis. So how we write this is parentheses, negative infinity, comma, infinity. Because there is no stopping point on this graph, so all we can assume is that it goes to infinity and beyond. Okay, so now if we're looking at the range, that's all the y values contained in the graph. And again, we have arrows on both ends, meaning it goes to infinity and beyond. So you guessed it, parentheses, negative infinity, comma, infinity, and that is your range for question 1. Okay, so looking at question 2, and we're looking for the domain, we notice arrows again at both ends of the function. So remember, domain is all the x values. So if you notice arrows going up, going to the left, contains all our x values. So it's the same as question 1, negative infinity, comma, infinity. So now if we were to look at and try and find the range, again, arrows pointing up, so it goes up all the way to infinity, but it doesn't go below here, which is negative 5. So what we're going to write for the range is bracket negative 5, comma, infinity, parenthesis. So if we look here, I put a bracket. Bracket means to include this number, which means it's defined in the function. So as we can see, the line clearly touches negative 5 right here. And parentheses means does not include, and that's why it's infinity. We don't know what infinity is defined as, so that's why we use a parenthesis, because we don't know how to define infinity. Now let's take a look at function in question 3. If we notice, it starts down here and ends up here. And another thing we notice is it has a open circle and a closed circle. So just like parentheses and brackets, open circle means not defined, closed circle means it is defined and we can use it. So again, for domain, we're looking on the x-axis where it starts here, comes all the way across to here. So our domain would be written as starting here, parenthesis, negative 5, comma, 2, bracket. Now remember, bracket is including, parenthesis is not including. So open circle, parenthesis, closed circle, bracket. So this function has a domain of negative 5, 2. So to find the range of this function, remember we're looking along the y-axis and we're starting here at its lowest point and ending here at its highest point. So we finally don't have one that involves infinity. So again, remember, open circle, not include, closed circle, include. So our range for this one is parenthesis, -4, comma, 8, bracket. And we use a bracket because it's included in the function and it is defined. So -4 is not defined, 8 is defined. Okay, so looking at number 4, looks a little scary, but it's fairly simple once you get the concept down. Let's take a look at the domain first, as we've been doing. So we notice it's an arrow here, so that means the graph starts somewhere way over here, all towards infinity. And remember, we're domain, so we're looking on the x-axis, and we can notice that it stops right here on the x-axis. So like I said, we go from infinity on the left, coming down, up, and it finishes at 8. So the way we'll write this, everything left of the origin is negative, so our domain here is -infinity with the parenthesis, comma, 8, bracket. Because remember, closed circle means included in the graph. Included in the function is defined. Now if we were going to look at the range, we're looking for its lowest point and its highest point on the y-axis. So right here, what y values are contained in this graph? So remember, we have an arrow here going towards infinity, and our lowest point is right here. So if we go by that, we write range is bracket -6, comma, infinity, parenthesis. So bracket because it's included down here, it is defined, and infinity because it keeps going up right here. Okay, so if we look at question 1 on the back, y equals -x squared minus 1, it says to graph it. So this is what you should get when you type it in the calculator and the graph shows up. It should look something like that. So if we were going to find a domain, again, we're looking on the x-axis here, and we notice arrows at both ends, and the graph extends this way and this way infinitely, so our domain would be -infinity to infinity, parenthesis. Now if we're looking at the range, we're looking along the y-axis for all the y values included in this function. So we notice arrows down here extending downward towards -infinity, and we notice it stops right here. This is the maximum point. So our range is parentheses -infinity, comma, -1, bracket. Remember, bracket include, parenthesis not include. So let's say you didn't have a calculator. We can also calculate the domain and range another way. So what you will do is you would pick a random x value. So let's start at 0. So you plug y, we plug y equals our random x value 0, or -0, but we know 0 can't be negative, 0 squared minus 1. So it comes out to y equals -1. So if we made a table of x values and y values, 0 would be somewhere down here, we'll say, at -1. If we went to -1, doing algebra, it comes out to -2, -2 comes out to -5, and we begin to see a pattern when we go the other way at 1, -2, 2, -5. So if we notice, we can pick any x values we want, and we will always get a y value. But what we notice is it never goes higher or greater than -1. Okay, so let's look at the domain of question 2 on the back. Again, we're looking at x values along the x-axis. But notice it starts right here and extends this way. There's nothing over here on the graph. So when we write our domain, try it for yourself. You get bracket 1, comma, infinity, parenthesis, because it starts at x equals 1 and extends indefinitely to infinity the other way. Now when we look at range, we're looking along the y-axis here, and we notice it starts at this point at 0, and it kind of just gradually keeps going up to infinity. So look, we have a closed circle, so what am I going to write? Bracket 0, comma, infinity. That's our range for this one. Okay, so just like the last problem, we can solve this one algebraically as well. So notice it's the square root of x minus 1. So if you did choose 0 like we did in the last problem, we have the square root of 0 minus 1, which is the square root of -1, and we know that you cannot have a negative square root. So that's why the first x value that is defined is 1, because 1 minus 1, the square root of that is square root of 0, which is 0. So that's why when we write our table x, y, it starts at 1, and y would be 0, 2, y would be 1, and etc. So you can solve for the domain and range algebraically, but it obviously helps if you have a calculator. Okay, that's it for this video. See you tomorrow in class.